You don't ever want to see a player go down the way that Ramsdale has gone down. Watching him play against Brentford was rough, but I'm not surprised that he made the mistakes that he did make because there's a lot of pressure on him. There's a lot of pressure because all the eyes on him. He doesn't seem like a player that deals with pressure well anyway. I mean, he's somebody that during the run-in spoke about how that he didn't deal with the pressure well. The team didn't deal with the pressure well. So this is a player that tells us that he doesn't deal with pressure well. And there was so much pressure put on this performance against Brentford that didn't even really matter because people before the game were saying this is the one that's going to give him the opportunity to come back into the team, which is not the case. He was just stepping in for Riya. Riya was never going to lose his spot, but he played like a player that was under a lot of pressure. Maybe your dad shouldn't be speaking to the media so often, but I understand why he did it. But at the same time, it only made it worse. The commentary that I was listening to was desperate for him to make a mistake so that they could reignite this goalkeeper conversation because it gets them clicks. It is something that they can bitch and moan about. Arsenal are playing too well and they need drama. They were waiting for that to happen, and it happened against Brentford. It's really it was really a tough watch to watch him struggle for those that first half. But Kaya Koenig was saying this. He was at the game, so the first thing that he tweeted was that Aaron Ramsdale made a huge error playing out from goalkeeper. Wissa tackles and lays off to Mbomo, but Rice is there to clear it off the line. Lucky escape. So we all remember that, right? At the next goal kick, Arteta wags his finger furiously to tell Ramsdale not to do the short goalkeeper routine with Gabriel and go long instead. They play short, and Arteta shakes his head in disappointment and anger. So that's an account from Kaya. So I'm not saying I didn't see it, but I would imagine he wouldn't lie, you know. So Arteta tells you to do one thing and you do something different. Why are you doing that? You know, I think this is the main issue with Ramsdale is that he doesn't do what the manager is asking him to do, and it gets him in trouble. And he also wants to compromise on the way that he plays out from the back, and Arteta doesn't want to compromise. Ramsdale then plays a line-splitting ball through to Trossard when he's next in possession, drawing a big applause from Mikel Arteta. So I remember that, seeing him do that pass, and I was like, good. You know, don't be afraid to continue to play out from the back. Do what the manager is asking you to do. If he wants you to play this line-splitting pass, do that. If he's telling you to play long, do that. Just do what the manager is asking you to do. Maybe that'll make your life a little bit easier. So I think this is just how we got here. I think people have focused on the wrong things this entire time. They focused on how much they love Ramsdale and Riya and the way that it's happened. But ultimately, the reason why Ramsdale lost his position is because he wanted to compromise on the way that he played back there. And Arteta is uncompromising. And I think most managers are that. They want to play their style. And if you don't play their way and you're unwilling to do so, you're gone. Look at Aubameyang. He didn't want to play out left. He wanted to play center. He didn't want to link up. He didn't want to do those things. So his influence on the team wavered because Lacazette was willing to play that way. You know, he was willing to play like that link up, hard-working kind of striker. So Lacazette was playing more than Aubameyang, and then Aubameyang left, you know. So I do feel like this is all about Arteta being uncompromising in the way he wants to play, the way that he wants to play. Ramsdale being unwilling to do that, and we saw that as happen against Brentford. And it's unfortunate because for me, it wasn't so much the mistake that he made playing out from the back and the nervousness, because I can understand that. It's Arteta's asking you to do something, just do it, right? Wolves want to bring in Ramsdale on a loan with an obligation to buy in January. And I thought, that is perfect. That is the perfect scenario. You could not have thought of a better one, right? Wolves want Arsenal's Aaron Ramsdale on a loan with an obligation to buy in January. So that is the perfect scenario. And I'll tell you why. Because it ends the circus. I'm tired of talking about it. And Riya is the number one. And so the faster we move on Ramsdale, the less we have to talk about this. Whether you like Riya or not, he's the number one. And so whatever's going to make him more comfortable and end the circus, that's kind of what we need right now, right? It's an obligation to buy. So that means that we know we'll get the funds at some point. It's guaranteed. So you can ask for what you want and then they'll have to pay you. And people that are like, why would they want Ramsdale? It's because Jose Sa is going to go to Saudi Arabia. So I remember hearing that when they played against Spurs. And I thought at that moment, I was like, they should come for Ramsdale. And so I'm happy that they're looking at Ramsdale. This is perfect. It's not a rival. We talked about him going to Chelsea and how that would prolong the circus a little bit longer. I think if he goes to Chelsea, if he goes to one of our rivals, then the constant conversation is, you made a mistake. Oh, look how he's doing. He's doing well for us. So it eliminates that altogether. There'll still be a little bit of that, but it won't be as bad. And the fourth reason why this is perfect is because Ramsdale can secure a spot for the Euros. Because as much as I think Ramsdale should go because the decision is made and I want the circus gone, equally, I do think that he's worked hard to establish himself in the England setup, and I would be disappointed for him if he didn't go to the Euros because he had 6 months not being a number one. It's already been mentioned by Southgate once, and there's already reports that Sam Johnston has actually jumped Ramsdale in the pecking order. So just like Leno, I think he'll lose his spot in the national team if he's not a number one. And so this will allow him to do that. So everybody wins. Arsenal get a loan with an obligation to buy. It ends the circus. It's not a rival. And Ramsdale gets to secure his spot. Everybody wins. Everybody wins. So I want to read some of your comments before I get into the other part of this, which is the fee and all that kind of stuff. But to me, this is exactly what we need to happen. O'Malley says we would make Riya permanent in Jan. D'Angelo says pay it off for Riya. That also came out that Arsenal are 100% going to make Riya permanent. So, and that's going to happen in the summer. So it is what it is, Arsenal era says it's hard for teams to press us with Riya in defense. Ramsdale is good, but the system demands more from our goalkeeper. But who comes in if Ramsdale leaves? We just need a number two. I think we've overcomplicate. I do think sometimes as Arsenal fans, we overcomplicate because sometimes in two scenarios now, we've had two number ones and we've almost pretended as though that's normal. It's not. Usually you have a number one that's your guy, and then you have some guy that basically is just there, And so I'm not saying you get a bum, but I'm just saying getting somebody like Matty Ryan again would not be the worst because it's a number one and a number two. Your number one goalkeeper plays most of the time, and it's not a big deal. And I don't think it'd be that difficult to find a number two goalkeeper in January that's just a number two. They need to be competent. I'm not saying go get Runnerson, but I am saying that I don't think we need another number one. I don't think we need to be pretending as though the number two situation or the number two role is anything other than what it is. It's historically, it's just a guy that just is there, right? But we need to end the circus, BB says Ramsdale to Wolves, maybe sell to a lower team, not our rivals. Santino says, Jess, let's be honest, Southgate was never going to see Ramsdale as an England starter. I just don't want him to lose his spot, as an option. Whether Southgate sees him as a number one, that's whatever, I just don't feel like he deserves to lose his spot as one of the goalkeepers at the Euros. I think he's earned that. He's worked for that. Boy says if we're selling Ramsdale, then Hine is starting in the return fixture against Brentford, or you can just get a number two goalkeeper. Number two goalkeepers usually cost nothing. They usually you can get them on a loan. Remember, I think we got Matty Ryan on a loan or free or something like that. So that's not necessarily the case. We don't need to overthink the number two goalkeeper situation. It can just be somebody on a free. It could be just anybody, as long as they're competent. I want it over with. It's too much. It's too, it may not be like that inside the dressing room, but it just feels like an unnecessary conversation when the decision has been made. Now, does Arteta have some culpability here? Absolutely. I think not telling the truth from the beginning and starting off with this whole charade of its two number ones opened up the Riya not having good games and people expecting Ramsdale to get another shot. And so that's continued the conversation. I think if Arteta has just said, we want to make a change in goalkeeper and Riya's the number one, that people would have been mad still, but we would have just known that Ramsdale is not going to play again. I was a little irritated yesterday that when I mentioned selling Ramsdale, people said that we need to be just selling him for any old thing. I'll tell you why he should not be sold for peanuts is because he's an England international and potentially the future England number one. You guys are telling me he never will be, but he could, right? 2 seasons of Premier League experience. We bought him for 25 million. So that's already like, we should not, like, we have boosted his profile. So Arsenal getting less than what they paid for him, or what they paid for him, is a joke, because he was largely considered a relegation level goalkeeper, and now he's playing, or was playing, for a Champions League level side, right? So I think that Ramsdale's value has went up since he's been at Arsenal, just by wearing our shirt. So there's no reason to sell him for peanuts. He's young. He'll still have good sell-on value. And the comps are Onana for 47 million to Man United, and Sanchez for 25 million to Chelsea. So he should fall somewhere in between there. Sanchez, no real Champions League experience, probably not. He's not the best goalkeeper in the world. Onana has Champions League experience, but maybe he's better than Ramsdale, or like his profile is better than Ramsdale. So I think it should be somewhere between 35 and 40 million that we should be getting an obligation from Wolves if they're going to buy him. I don't think that accepting anything less than that makes any sense. It's not because he's not a good goalkeeper. It's because of our style, and we want to play a different way, right? And so 35 to 40 million for me is the fee. It should be the fee. If we're selling him for 30 million or 25 or 20, we've effed up massively. There's no reason why Arsenal should not be able to extract good fees for our players. I watched Cole Palmer, who had 14 appearances in the Premier League, go for 45 million this past summer. He wasn't even a full England international. So for Ramsdale to go for peanuts, and peanuts for me is 20, 25 million, like what we spent on him, is a travesty. And again, obligation to buy in the summer, so you don't have to do it in the January window. You could do it in the summer. You just got 40 million for Mateus Nunes or whatever. You're going to get money from Saudi for Jose Sa. You got some cash. Hand it over. Arsenal era says, I don't see us getting a forward in January, a midfielder or a defender for Ramsdale, Jess. Remember, Arsenal doesn't really sell well. Leo says 35 to 40 million is reasonable, but I can't see any club paying more. Amina says 40 million. Lucas says City sold academy goalkeeper for 15 to 20 million. Exactly. Let's keep it real. Like, I think we accept a lot of, we just, it's this player because of blah. Other teams are able to extract value. Arsenal need to figure out a way to do it as well. Here to There says, great points, Jess, but our situation to get him out is more dire. And yes, we have messed up the situation up. Hugo says, didn't we sign him for 30? I think it was 25 plus 5. I looked, some reports said 30, some said 25, but I do think the base fee was 25. So yeah, I mean, Hugo says 37 million, something around that I think would be acceptable, like 35 plus 2, I don't know, something. Ramsdale, again, is a Champions League level goalkeeper, England international, potential future England #1, good at playing with the ball at his feet, good shot stopper when you're on the ropes. There's a lot of good things that Ramsdale offers. He can't play for Arsenal, playing off the back, but he definitely can play for you. C. Walder says, and a Neto. Would you guys want to do something like that? Hey, you guys can have Ramsdale for 25 plus Neto or something like that. Is that how it goes? Something like that, maybe. Yo-Yo says, Rams will confirm what most of us know about how bad the club is at selling. Fair enough. Hugo says, Ramsdale to Villa. Why? I mean, Martinez is there. OG Jill says, are we giving up on Ramsdale so easy? I don't know if it's we. I think Arteta has kind of already replaced him with Riya. So it's not really about what we think. I think a lot of people would want Ramsdale to stay and didn't view him as the biggest thing that we needed to replace. This is an Arteta thing. 100%. He thought that Ramsdale, I think he believed Thomas Partey and Ramsdale were big reasons why we didn't win the league last season, and why we saw replacements in those two positions, where a lot of people didn't feel like we needed upgrades in those positions because we like those players. I think people felt like we needed a better goal scorer and an upgrade on Granit Xhaka, mostly, maybe a fullback. I think everybody was happy with the Timber signing and felt like that was something that we needed. But I think it has come to a shock that Arsenal were willing to spend so much on a DM when we already had Thomas Partey, and we were willing to bring in Riya, what we already had in Ramsdale. But I think that tells you all you need to know about how Arsenal felt about the season last season, that we needed to be more solid at the base of our midfield with a more defensive player. And we also needed a goalkeeper that could play out from the back the way that we needed. So that's how the club viewed our season last season. The Arsenal perspective says Ramsdale and cash for Neto sounds great. Yeah, if you want it, if you still want Neto, like I did see an interview that he did where he said that his injury is not as bad as he thought or as bad as they thought, and he'd be back sooner rather than they thought. So maybe if Neto comes back and he can play from like December till January and he's picks up where he left off, maybe that's an option, but he is their best player. So that's another thing as well. Like, would they be willing to give away their best player? Or could we get a deal done in January for the summer, maybe? That's an option. P-Way says Watkins is not good enough. P-Way says Watkins can win Arsenal the title. The Arsenal perspective says Arsenal always talk about how the margins are so tight, and the willingness to sell Partey and Ramsdale tells you a lot. One needs to know about in terms of bridging the gap with City. Yo-Yo says Riya, Timber, Rice, Kai were all to improve us off the ball. I really like that way of putting it. Off the ball, we weren't that great. We were okay off the ball last season, but we were really good on the ball. I think now we're like really good off the ball. Here to there says bottom line is Arteta knows that he has to get better play from Raya. He has to make it work. Case in point, look how happy he was after Kai scored. That supersedes the fee on Ramsdale. Chow, he was so happy about Kai Havertz, and he was probably just tired of being asked about him. And when you really believe in a player, like you have to really believe in a player to bring in Kai Havertz when you could have brought in anybody. Arsenal were top of the hype train at the end of last season going into that summer window because all of our contemporaries had poor seasons. So we were the ideal location or the ideal place to go. And we chose to bring in somebody that had 3 years at Chelsea, poor years, that cost 65 million, that doesn't necessarily fit the profile of the left center mid that we thought we needed, that a lot of us still feel like we need. And so Arteta's was under a lot of pressure for a lot of the big decisions he made. Raya, Kai, Partey, no striker, all those things were huge decisions, right? Keeping Eddie, major decisions that he made. So I think he needs to cross one off the list. Something has to start working. Raya needs to start putting in consistent performances without mistakes. Kai Havertz needs to start scoring goals and getting assists and playing confidently no matter where he plays. He needs to get a balanced midfield in there with the players that we have, and we need to score goals. I think you just need some of these things knocked off the list. And I think that's why you saw the reaction that you saw with Kai, is because he's like, I need them off my back, because every conversation was about a decision that he made over the summer that was affecting us or whatever. And like, if it wasn't that, it was the referees. So we've talked, like, literally he's spoken mostly about everything other than how good Arsenal have been this season. And I'm sure that that's very frustrating for him. Leo says, if people can get off Raya's back, he will improve. Ramsdale's fans put Raya under pressure from day one. I agree with this. I think a lot of the nerves were him playing out from the back in a way. I don't think you guys realize this, that Ramsdale just did not do the things that Raya is doing. Like, a lot of the things that he was doing, like really inviting the pressure, are things that made us nervous, but we didn't see that from Ramsdale because he would just hoof it long or do what he wanted to do because he didn't want to put himself under any sort of risk, right? And so when Raya is doing it and he's getting the fans getting all nervous and he's just doing what the managers ask him to do and he's making mistakes doing it, it's just all like this big cocktail of craziness, really. And so I just think Raya will calm down quite a bit when he gets to the Emirates and he gets the same kind of love that Saliba got when he headed the ball in the back of his own net. He'll feel a lot better when he gets the same backing that all of the rest of our players get, and it's not this constant like, we hate you because you're not Ramsdale, because I do think that some of the fans just did not want Raya to work and were waiting for him to make one mistake to jump on his back. He didn't cover himself in glory in some of those circumstances, but I think some of the things that people were saying he was doing were overblown. Like, he was massacred for the Julian Alvarez, almost like the ball almost bouncing into the back of our net. when he blocked it, but they totally disregarded the whole rest of the half. And the second half, where he was instrumental in us getting the goals that are the goal and winning the game, people didn't give him any credit for that because of the first 20 or like 15, 20 minutes. No credit at all. But yesterday, when Ramsdale had two mistakes in the first half and then cleaned it up in the second, people were like, but he was much better in the second half. I'm like, where was that energy for Raya? So I just want the circus gone. Like, as much as I like Ramsdale, I think a lot of the reason why people love him is they love him, the person, and they're unwilling to see some of the obvious things that if it was any other player that we didn't like as much, we wouldn't be so accepting, i.e., not doing what the manager is asking him to do.